If you're interested in learning how to capture those awesome firework photos with your entry-level DSLR, stay tuned. This video is for you. We're in the United States and it's the month of June, which means July is quickly upon us, and more specifically July 4th. That is the date that the United States celebrates our great independence. That means lots of fireworks. And the fireworks not only occur on the 4th, but they'll also occur weeks before and weeks after. And I thought this would be a great time to fire up a video on how to capture those dramatic images. As we get going, I want to start off by covering some of the equipment you're going to need besides your DSLR or camera. Now this right here is the Nikon D3400. This is considered an entry-level camera by Nikon, but I've done many videos on it, and for good reason. It's because I really like this camera and it's capable. And I want you to understand that if you're new to the world of DSLRs and you have this camera, you too will be able to capture these great, awesome images. So, what else will you need? When we get underway, you're going to need a steady surface. This right here is a tripod. Now I'll list a link below for some tripods that I use that might be helpful to you, but you can use any tripod. And if you don't have a tripod, any steady surface will work. As we go into this video, I'll show you what I mean when we set up to do some demos. What else will you need? Well, this right here is a wireless shutter release. Now they also make them with cables, but I've used this one for many years. It's relatively cheap. I got this on Amazon for like $15 or $20, and I'll post a link below as to where you can get this as well. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off by jumping into the settings on the camera, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of how to scope, do a little bit of recon on the location, and I'll tell you why that's important. Because if you take a shot of fireworks bursting in the air and you don't have a foreground or a background of any sort and you have just the firework, that alone can be very awesome. But as I quickly discovered early on, when I sent that out to other people, they said, where was it taken? And it got me thinking, and I thought, well, it could have been taken anywhere in the world unless you have some iconic buildings as that backdrop. So I'm going to show you what I mean in just a second, but we're going to start off by covering the settings on your camera. As mentioned before, I am using the Nikon D3400, but keeping in mind that the settings we're going to go over will work for any camera that's out there. So on the back of the 3400, you can take a look at the display right here, and you can see I am in manual mode. Now, if you're not quite sure how to get there and you're new to the world of DSLRs, it's leveraged by the dial on the top here. Just go to the letter M. And as I rotate this, you'll see that my display changes here. So on the back of this, I'm in manual mode. You'll see my shutter is set to bulb, my f-stop is set to 11, and my ISO is set to 100. Now you may ask, what is bulb mode? Well, bulb mode allows you to manually control the shutter. So you can manually open the shutter and manually close the shutter, and that is ideal for fireworks. So as the firework traverses up in the air, you can open it, and then after it bursts, you can shut it. It's great, and that's where you want to be. So we're going to talk just briefly about how to make these settings happen in your camera. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. Again, in manual mode, on this particular camera, right up here in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little button. It looks like a plus-minus sign. If I hold this button down and rotate this dial back here to the left and right, it's going to allow me to control the aperture, the f-stop. So you can see that right there. Now, why f11? I find f11 to be a nice sweet spot for this 18 to 55 kit lens. You can really use any f-stop you want, although I would suggest one that's above 7 or 8. And again, I like f11 for this kit lens. Now, when you want to adjust the shutter speed here, you don't need to do anything other than rotate the dial. And you can see right here, it goes up to 30, and one stop past 30 is bulb mode. So that makes that nice. The other thing you're going to want to do if you have this particular camera is go into the menu, because you're going to want to take a look at the ISO setting right here. You want to disable auto ISO. So I'm just hitting the menu right here, and let's go see if we can find this. I'm right here under shooting menu, and I'm going to come down and I see ISO sensitivity settings. You're going to come right down here and you'll see how I have it set to off. Chances are, by default, it's set to on. So ensure you have that set to off and adjust your ISO sensitivity to 100. That's as low as it will go. So, with that said, these are the settings that we have on this camera, and if you have any other camera, you're going to want to use the same thing. So, how do we handle focus? It's a big question. A lot of people have that. Now, I created a video on depth of field, and I'll post that link below as well in case you haven't seen it. But in this case, when you want to lock in focus, there's a couple of ways to do it. What I would recommend, and it's the preferred method, is even though it's going to be dark out, you can focus on anything in the distance and lock in on your focus, which I use back button focus, and I have a video for that as well. So my focus is locked in on this button right here. I lock in on the focus. I'm going to go ahead and switch to live view so we can kind of see. Now I'm in an empty parking garage, so we're not going to see too much here, but I think you'll get the idea. So I can lock in on my focus, and this is what I would do if I were outside and it's dark out, and if I have any kind of light in the distance, I will do this. And once the focus is locked in, you're good to go. There is something called a hyperfocal point. Now again, I mentioned this in this video I created on depth of field, but to not get too complicated, basically what it means is from a given point to infinity, you will be in focus. So all you really need to know is just focus on something in the distance and you'll be fine. Now, if you want to know a little more about this, the other thing you can do is you can manually focus. So on this particular camera, on the ring in the very front, you can rotate this dial and you can manually focus. Now, they'll say focus to infinity. Well, where is infinity on this lens? If I turn it all the way to the left, you'll see that it's really meant to focus up close. I'm just going to put my hand out here. I don't know how well we can see this on the video, but it's relatively in focus on this camera. Now, if I rotate it all the way to the right, that is more of the infinity setting. There is no stop though, so you're basically just going all the way to the right until you feel that you got it, and then that's it. You should be at infinity. So that's if you want to try to manually focus this particular lens. Now again, I'd recommend just locking focus in, and you're good to go. You'll never need to touch it again when we do our fireworks. I'm at the top of a parking garage in a stairwell, and I'm going to step outside in just a minute and I'm going to show you what I see. It's windy out there though, so I think it's going to be better to kind of communicate in here before I step outside. Now, the reason I'm at this particular location is because I know that the fireworks are going to be shot from that direction. And I also know that the buildings around me are iconic to the city of Carmel, which is where I am right now. Now, I'm going to step outside and I'm going to show you what I see, but the thing I want you to understand is that when you go to shoot fireworks at your location, it's important to go out during the day, scout around, and look for the best location for you to take those images. And remember, try to get something in the foreground and the background, something that resembles the location of where you're at. It's going to really add to the overall dramatic image that you capture. So with that said, let's go ahead and step outside and I'm going to show you what I see. The building off to the left is called the Palladium. This is an iconic building in the city of Carmel, and I know that off to the right somewhere the fireworks will be shot. Now, anytime you're out and about and you're looking for that location, take time to scout around, and you'll notice over to the further right there's some additional buildings that I might be able to incorporate into the image that I capture. As mentioned, it is windy out here, so I'm hoping you can hear me okay. But this is the camera setup. I have the building over to my left, and then I'm thinking the fireworks will be off to the right, okay? So this is the wireless remote that I discussed earlier, and I want to go through really quick on how to set this up, and it's not a big deal at all. But on the back of the camera, there's the button right here, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in real quick so we can take a closer look at it. I had to come back inside to show you this because it was so bright and windy out there, so I'm back in the stairwell. I wanted to show you how to use this wireless release. So on the back of the camera, on this D3400, you'll see a button down here in the bottom right back side, right where my thumb is. You want to hit this right here. You're going to want to select this option that I currently have highlighted. And this is the release mode for the wireless device right here. Now the one right next to it will give you a 2-second delay. I typically don't use that one, and I use this, so go ahead and hit OK. And now when you push the button, it's going to open the shutter. I'm going to go ahead and push this, and we're going to see just how this works. But keeping in mind that inside here, we have really nothing to look at. But when I push the button, it's going to open. And now it's open. I'm going to go ahead and shut it. And it's going to be way overexposed, which is to be expected. There it is. So that's basically what this will do for you, and that's what bulb mode will do. Now I can try to open and close this as fast as I can. Let's see what happens. That's a little better, right? But I think you get the idea. So at night, you'll be able to open this shutter, wait for the burst to finish, and then close the shutter. Now, since this is the month of June and the fireworks haven't started at this particular location, I wanted to get this video out before the 4th, but I do have some images that I took last year from this exact location, except I was on the ground instead of being up high. But you're going to see how I captured the palladium inside the shots, so let's jump into some of those images and take a look. I'm at a nearby city called Fishers, and tonight they're doing the Fishers Freedom Festival. So it's getting dark, and I have the camera set up and dialed in just as I mentioned before. I've got my wireless shutter release right here, and let's go ahead and we're going to keep an eye out for the fireworks. I'm going to show you just how I take these. Now, as mentioned, I focused in on an object that is relatively far away into the horizon, which means I should be dialed in on the hyperfocal point, so I should be focused to infinity. I did try to find some iconic buildings around here, but I'm really not seeing any, so what I decided to do is put some of the landscape in the foreground and background. It'll make for a more interesting image. The other thing to note is that when I focused on something in the horizon, I was able to do so in autofocus mode. But something that's very important is you want to switch to manual focus. And if you're not quite sure how to do that, what you want to do is hit the I button in the bottom left-hand corner, and that'll show the icon as to where your autofocus and manual focus switch is. So just be sure you switch back to manual, and then you can use your wireless shutter release. So let's go ahead and wait for the fireworks to start. It's the day after the fireworks show, and I had a great time taking those shots last night. It was a lot of fun because you never know what you might get. Now, with that said, I have 3 important notes to pay attention to. First off, the focusing. I mentioned you must switch to manual focus. Why is that important? Well, because if you're using a wireless remote like this right here and you leave it in autofocus mode, the camera will not fire until it locks focus. So at night, with the camera pointed up in the air or wherever it might be, chances are it will not auto-lock focus, so you must switch to manual focus in order for the shutter to move. That's something very important to understand. The other thing to note is this. This camera, again, this is a Nikon D3400, by default has noise reduction enabled. Now, Because of this, when you take long shutters, it spends time processing that image. So you might miss a shot. And if you go to take, say, a 4 or 5 second shot, and you see another firework go up in the air and you might try to open your shutter again, it won't open because the camera is processing. So what can you do to combat this? It's very simple. Disable the noise reduction. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But I want to get to the third point. The third point is with the wireless remote. Now, this wireless remote right here, if you can see that, it says for Nikon. Okay, this is not necessarily made by Nikon. It's just generic. Now, it works fine, and I've had no issues with it. But one thing I want you to note is that when you go to use this, I've noticed that I can't necessarily use it from just any angle. Sometimes you have to move it around the camera to figure out where the infrared sensor is. I believe it's on the front right side of this camera, but I'm not 100% sure. So it's just something to think about if you're using this wireless remote. Again, I'll post a link for this below. Let's go ahead and just take a quick moment, and I'm going to show you how to disable the noise reduction. You are going to hit the menu button right here on the left-hand side. And what we're going to want to do is go into the shooting menu. So use your pad over here and arrow down. We're in the shooting menu, and right here at the top or somewhere inside your menu you should see noise reduction. You can see this is set to on, which again, that is the setting by default. So go ahead and push the OK button and set this to off. I hope this video has inspired you to go capture some of those awesome firework photos. Now, I know some of my subscribers are spread across the globe, and I'd be curious to know what you might capture. If you like, post a link to where your photos are located and I'll provide a little feedback. Likewise, if you have any questions, post those below and I'll do my best to help you out. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. It's called The Real World. More often than not, I post videos about photography and technology, but you never know. So until the next video, take care of yourself and be safe.